Welcome back to the CTO Playbook, the podcast dedicated to helping CTOs excel. Is speed about moving faster or learning faster? As CTOs, we're taught to value urgency, momentum, and execution. But what if the teams that truly move fast are the ones that know when to slow down, reflect, and learn? In this episode, I'm joined by Bastien Duret, CTO at Inato, to explore a different definition of speed, one built on curiosity, disciplined postmortems, and turning problems into learning opportunities. If firefighting feels busy but rarely effective, this conversation may change how you think about progress. Because smooth acceleration often beats frantic sprinting. I'm your host, Adam Horner, coach to CTOs from startups to enterprises, helping tech leaders lead with clarity, confidence, and strategic impact. If you feel like you're figuring it out the hard way, you're not alone. That's exactly why I created the CTO Playbook. Find out more and sign up for the weekly newsletter at thectoplaybook.com. Let's meet Bastien and explore his playbook for learning from our mistakes. Bastien, welcome to the CTO Playbook. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because your way of thinking about problems, learning, and flow lines up beautifully with a lot of what I see CTOs wrestling with every week.
All right. Thanks, Adam, for having me.
So for listeners who are meeting you for the first time, Bastien, can you give us sort of the short version of who you are, what Inato does, and what your role as CTO actually looks like day to day?
Sure. I'm Bastien. I'm the Chief Technical Officer at Inato. We're a smallish French-American company building a web product in the clinical trials space, so the healthcare industry. Basically, we're building and operating a cloud web-based product to make clinical trials more effective. And my role is to lead the tech department, building and operating this product. So software engineers, data analysts, and now even AI engineers, all working together into making this product a success and making clinical trials faster and more efficient.
Excellent. Now, you made a big point about making the case that it's a French-American company. Tell us a little bit about what that actually means in practice.
Of course, so initially we're a French company because the founders are French persons. So
Right.
2 doctors and 2 French engineers. The doctors knew the problem space, the industry, and the 2 engineer founders were there with their skills and energy to fix the problems, at least try to fix some problems in this problem space. But the actual market is global, and most of our customers are in the US, and the larger share of the market is in the US. So it made sense as we grew to go from the French market to the more global market. And we hired people in the US and expanded the team in order to do so.
Okay, so your team is based in combination of France and the US. In terms of the markets that you serve, though, you mentioned that it's global. So are you serving customers literally in all the continents, or are there sort of particular areas where you focus on for the majority of your customer base?
So in theory, our customers are large global corporations operating all over the world. So you can think of big pharmaceutical companies. They're working everywhere. Also, we have users who are clinical research centers, and they can be anywhere on the planet. In practice, we have more customers and users in North America and in Western Europe because that's where we started. But the ambition is to be global.
Got it. And one of the things that I find interesting is that you yourself didn't come in as a domain expert in clinical trials, did you? And yet you've clearly built credibility there. But first of all, what I want to do is go back a bit earlier in your CTO journey. So just tell us a little bit about a time when something went wrong, a bug, an incident, or a decision, where your first instinct was, we just need to move faster. But reality had other plans.
Should this be from this experience now or even before? Because
let's go before. Let's go sort of early on in your career. So not necessarily as a CTO, but earlier when you're working towards that.
So I started as a software engineer. I started my career as an, let's say, application developer, web developer, iOS developer, Android developer. I mean, I went through a lot of stages and steps. I can think of an old one. It was working on an Android application on kind of low-end smartphones. So, I mean, if you're working with iPhones, they're pretty high end, right? They have a lot of memory and you don't have like a ton of devices. I mean, now you have a lot. You have so many iPhone versions, but on Android, the landscape is really like wide and fragmented. So getting your app to work correctly on such a wide range of devices is a real challenge. And so you want to have like a nice, clean, crisp, fancy looking application, but you also want it to run on cheap Samsung smartphones. And yeah, I remember struggling with memory consumption in the application. So we had crash reports coming in, and most of them were on low-end devices. So the trick was to be able to understand where this memory consumption was coming from, accepting that there was a threshold we could go under if we wanted this like nice, fancy looking app on high-end devices, but still being able to optimize so that it runs on some cheap low-end devices. So part of it was fixing the problem, finding out the root cause of these memory leaks, but part of it was also embracing the fact that it cannot work on all devices, and we have to let go of some share of users on our app.
Right. And what was at stake when you were trying to go through that problem and figure out the memory allocation?
On one end, something's not working. So you definitely have something to learn from what's happening. It means that during the development process, so a couple of weeks, a couple of days, maybe a couple of months earlier, you made some wrong decisions or wrong assumptions. Maybe you didn't know, maybe you were not aware, maybe you actually were aware, but it was a conscious decision. But in most cases, it's something that you're not aware of. And so this is a learning opportunity for you, ready for the taking. So this is, I think, the most exciting part of analyzing like the situation, the timeline of events that led to this crash report that a user sent to you as a gift. There is this investigation and this learning opportunity for you, but also there's a user that has a malfunctioning app and that's ready to give you like 1 star on the App Store because your app is not working. So the balance is to fix the issue as quickly as possible, but also find some time and space for this learning that you have to do in order to prevent this issue from happening again in the future.
And how did your team react to this kind of situation where you've got a combination of decision that had happened previously, some sort of constraint you now need to put onto the user base, plus also, well, how can we get it working for this now exceptional user who's got a device that perhaps isn't quite up to our ambitions?
The first step is to stem the bleeding. I mean, the most immediate action you need to take is to fix the situation for your user. They're trying to do some work to accomplish something using your product, and that's the most urgent thing to fix. You have to do this as quickly as you can, and you can take shortcuts to protect the customer. Then there's a second step where you, as a team, potentially regroup and analyze like what went wrong and how we can do better next time. But this cannot be done in the heat of the moment where you have like customer that's ready to leave and drop your app.
And I presume that this was an app that was focused at the time at a sort of a consumer market?
Yeah, this is an old story. So yeah, it was a consumer-focused app.
Yeah, so those 1-star reviews really do count for a lot because they bring the average down fast, don't they?
Of course. In a B2B situation, it's slightly different. I mean, one angry user usually won't cancel your contract with the customer, especially if it's a large one and the user is not necessarily the one purchasing it. But there's like a relationship between user happiness and how effective your product is and your ability to renew contracts.
Yeah. And so clearly there's a moment there where you've got to move fast in order to, your phrase was stem the bleeding. So just dig into that a little bit. When you say sort of stem the bleeding, and in this case it was make that one user happy, but can you give us some other examples of where you sort of, your stem the bleeding approach might be something slightly different than just make that one user happy?
Sure. I mean, one time it was this moment where the whole service was down because of one of our vendors that was having an outage. So in this case, it's not one user. That's
all users.
Yeah, having an issue. It's all users everywhere, or in one part of one geography in particular. And so in this case, you have two options. You trust that the vendor will fix the issue, or you have to find a way to work around this particular vendor and find an alternative solution to, for instance, serve your web application. Let's say your front-end CDN serving your JavaScript bundles does not work anymore. You can figure out ways to distribute these JavaScript bundles in other ways while you wait for the vendor to fix their outage. And then you can figure out a way to have some failover between vendors, because you cannot afford to have your whole product down for several hours because of one outage in particular.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of different scenarios, different organizations, there's a very different impact that you might have from a few minutes outage. In one organization might be nothing. In another organization, a few minutes outage could be literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases.
In our case, there's what's in the contracts, like your SLAs, what you have to, your contractual obligations in terms of uptime. But there's also our intentions, like what we want to do, because it's not because we have some wiggle room in the contracts that we're happy to be down for a couple minutes or hours. So sure, even though it might not cost you anything because you are down, it's part of your SLAs, you still want to have a hard look at the situation and make sure it does not happen again or becomes even worse in the future.
Yeah, and because I think getting quick reaction to something is pretty much embedded into the sort of the Silicon Valley way, the high speed startup way. And I think one of the scenarios that I came across was almost exactly the opposite. In fact, I was working for a Silicon Valley company at the time, and the approach there was to go in and get stuff procured by the customer. So again, B2B customers, get stuff procured by the customer as quickly as possible to get a platform up and running. And in most organizations, the quickest way to do that is to run around the hurdles, to run around the procurement processes and just get things done quickly. And I encountered one organization where actually that's how I hit the barrier, I hit the wall, because I tried to go around the processes and discovered that A, that made it more difficult, and B, it was actually quicker to use their internal processes rather than to try and run around them. But I did that without checking first. And that was one of those things that I think in the end I sort of figured out, okay, sometimes speed is not actually going around the problem, the blocker. Sometimes the speed is actually going straight through the natural path down the middle. But knowing the difference between the two can be a challenge at times.
So how were you able to run around this procurement process?
Well, generally, in most organizations, there's, important enough stakeholders where you can say, hey, can you just, have a word in these people's ear and put my ticket to the top of the queue, or get this work done, or, procure from this third-party external company that we have a relationship where you may not necessarily yet, and we'll handle the finances on the back end in some other way. So, there are ways around these things in most organizations, a way of speeding up the thing that you need doing over and above what, the typical internal process might be. And then in some organizations like this one I encountered, actually the fastest way was to fill in the form, send it to the correct team, wait for them to do it. And then I came into the office the next day and boom, there's 2 new servers wired up, plugged in, ready to go with the right licenses on them and everything that was specified on the forms, which in most organizations, that would be several weeks worth of waiting. So
actually the official way was the right way to go, and going around was not a great idea in the end.
For that particular organization, right? So, and the thing is, you create this process, you learn from it, and then in some cases, you need to add, like in this case, the learning was added an additional step to check if the internal procurement processes actually work before you try and step around them. But yeah, so this idea that speed is crucial and to get things back up and running, get things operating in the quickest way, pretty much at the heart of where you're coming from here. And so the next stage then, after you fix the problem, is to then try and learn from it, as you said. So if we treat every problem as a learning opportunity rather than just a technical problem, so what was it that drove that mindset for you? Where did that experience sort of develop into this process of, okay, we've got to learn from everything?
I think there are two ideas. One is like you want to actually, there's like this natural urge to understand what happened, like this urge to like pick the pieces apart and to figure out like, why did this happen? And to not just blindly move forward, apply some kind of band-aid and forget about it and move on to the initial task. I think there's something inside us. Usually in most engineers, they want to understand, like they want to figure out what happened. There's some curiosity that they need to satisfy. And this aligns well with actually what the business needs, is to make sure you're able to focus on creating more value and not that you're not dragged by all the mistakes you've made in the past. So this goal of learning what happened to figure out a solution so that next time things work out better is actually good for engineers' curiosity and good for the business that wants to move forward and not get bogged down in all the bugs, all the crashes that keep happening because you're not actually learning from your past mistakes. So yeah, after you've stemmed the bleeding comes actually, for me, the most fun part of the problem solving is to analyze like what happened, like the series of events that led to this failure mode, and to then list all the possible ways you have to in front of you to do things better. And this is in part analysis and in part like creativity, because you don't want to go out and like for each problem that you encounter create like a new process, a new big complex way of making sure it does not happen again. This can be a way to fail if every failure creates a whole bunch of new process that actually prevents you from moving forward. So being able to find clever solutions to the problems you've had without creating like friction in your ability to create more value going forward, this is a really interesting puzzle to solve.
Yeah, and it's often a very similar puzzle to refactoring, isn't it? Because you sort of end up with a bunch of old things that need to keep working. You've got one new thing you need to add in to fix, to solve, to prevent from happening. And adding all those things in together is often a case of, okay, now when we add it in, how can we then distill it down to its essence once again so it doesn't become this behemoth that kills us?
Yeah. What is the smallest change you can make to make things a little bit better for the future? And this is a hard question. Indeed, it's close to refactoring, and the danger would be to, for each problem, rethink completely the way you do things. This would be too much. This would be really taxing. You want to create a system where each bug is a good learning opportunity that people look forward to, not something that they're scared of because they will have to do some kind of crazy analysis of how to prevent this from happening again.
That's a great way of looking at it. I like that. And I think the other thing about this point is that a lot of engineers like to sort of, as you say, pull it apart, look underneath the lid and see what it is that broke it. But one of the traps that I find is that people start doing that too early. The system's still down. It's still sort of, while the system's still down, they're already sort of trying to pull the thing apart and look under the hood. And that's where I think, okay, no, get the thing back up and running first. That's the most important. And then you can look under the hood afterwards.
Sure. And this is tricky because it's a natural feeling. Like you want to understand that while the system is not functioning is when things are the most easy to troubleshoot and to pick apart. So you need to resist like this urge to understand at first. You need to just stem the bleeding, just protect the customer, do crazy, I would say, dirty hacks in order to fix. And then once the customer has been protected, you can go back to your analysis. And this is why you need to invest in some kind of forensics ability to be able to go back in time and understand what happened.
Yeah, because the time when it happens is not the time to investigate it. And one of the things I've learned as a CTO is that the outage itself often isn't my problem as a CTO. My problem is often the way that people react to it being the problem. So if you get people to have the right behavior when the issues happen and to apply their curiosity at the right point, then sort of watching for the system and the people, how they behave rather than the incident itself. So when you're looking at this, what are you looking for in the system and the people as opposed to in the actual incident itself?
Ideally, you would like to come back from holidays and like stuff happened. Outages happen, like a lot of things went wrong, and you weren't there. People could not ask you what to do, and you want to see like how did they behave when you weren't there. This is the ideal situation. You want to come back from holidays and they quickly reacted, quickly fixed the problem initially with a quick and dirty solution, and then they analyzed why it happened, implemented a clever solution that did not change the whole process for everyone, and shared what they learned with the rest of the team. This is what you want to see when you come back from holidays. So indeed, you're not the one fixing the issue. You're you're the one creating the system so that people do this bug solving, problem solving correctly.
Awesome. So the hallmark of success there is that you are not the operational bottleneck.
Of course, and this happens for issue like production issue troubleshooting, but it applies for everything, even for releasing a new project, for like everything that your department is responsible for. You are successful as a leader, as a CTO, if things work correctly when you're not in the room or you're not there. I mean, you can ask yourself, then what's your role? Like, where do you add value? You add value in creating this system over time and improving it over time, but you're not here to hold it together while you're there in the room. It needs to work without you, and it needs to become even better thanks to you.
So talking about that then, let's unpack that a little bit. So let's talk about the postmortem itself, because I find that many teams say that they do them, but there's a far fewer number that actually do them really well. So what makes the difference between a good and a great postmortem in your experience?
Control points for a good postmortem. I think in the end, there's a question of like, so what do we do from this? Like what do we implement from this? What did we learn and what do we implement going forward? A postmortem that leads to no action usually is not very satisfying. Sometimes it can be pragmatic, like to apply the Pareto principle and say, okay, in this particular case, we're not going to change anything to our ways of working. We're in a like bad luck situation, and it would cost too much to try to implement a solution because we think it's not going to happen for the next 2-3 years. So let's do nothing, but it's an explicit let's do nothing. It's not we're not giving up. We're explicitly not doing anything. Yeah, active decision of and not doing. In 80% of cases, you want to see something come out of your postmortem. You want to see at least one tiny action implemented. And it can be a lot of things. It can be a new step in your CI/CD process. It can be a new way to shift left your way to deal with performance and not discover that you have performance issues once your software is released in production. The higher up the value stream you can implement your countermeasure, the better, because I mean the errors.
So shift left is to bring things earlier in your process. Right?
Cost more and more the later you let them slip through the value stream. So yeah, you want to see something come out of your postmortem, and if this action happens really early in the process, preventing the issue from happening early on, then that's for the best.
So prevention is better than cure.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I guess the macro point there is that your postmortem should pass the so what test.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So what? So what now? And this is really important. Another, I think, interesting element of a postmortem is like, how does it make us reflect on the way we're working? I think a postmortem that says like, this is your issue, this is a solution, is usually a smell. Like usually there are a lot of factors that create an issue, and a postmortem can be too simplistic if it only focuses on like one aspect. Usually it's the person who wrote this postmortem had the solution initially in their mind, and they just try to wrap it,
justifying the solution.
Create a postmortem from it just to justify the implementation of the solution. So yeah, another thing that I would look for in a postmortem is a variety of factors and a clear like timeline or diagram of why this happens. It can happen because of a series of events or because of a synchronous combination of events happening together, but seeing them like in a sequence or all together in some kind of system diagram, usually it's a good sign that the person has taken a step back on the situation, has a good grasp on like, why did this happen?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the 5 whys process, and one of the visualizations of that being the herringbone diagrams, where there's sort of multiple different things feeding into a timeline that then produces the outcome event or situation that was encountered before we applied the fix.
Yeah, it can be a good way to judge or assess of the quality of the postmortem is how many times can you ask why in the analysis? And if it's less than 2, it means it's a bit superficial.
Yeah, unless you're a tiny startup with a tiny code base, I think that's probably true.
I mean, sometimes problems are simple, and postmortems are simple too. You're starting, you have no tests, you have no release process. And every time you release, the product breaks in production. I mean, easy. I mean, add a basic CI/CD process, automate your deployment, and add at least one basic end-to-end test that just checks that the product is able to start. But this should be one of your first postmortems. After a while, you've already made all these investments, and the problems become more complex.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the only other time it can be a very simple cause, I find, is when it's one of those sort of black swan events that you never saw coming. We had one relatively recently, AWS failing in multiple regions simultaneously. It was the DNS issue that was at the heart of it, which basically created a daisy chain, a domino effect of a load of systems going down, which resulted in, I don't know, a third of the internet being unavailable, depending on who you speak to. And again, that may be one of those situations where, yeah, the cause was relatively simple. We never saw it coming. And the decision may be, like you mentioned before, it may be a case of, well, this is a once in 5 years issue. So we're gonna hold our hands up and say sorry and not do anything active on this one. But let's have a look at the process of it itself, because I think the way that a postmortem is run can also be very interesting in terms of how you get to those answers, how you figure out what those root causes are, and therefore what the long-term solution should be in this situation. So for you, what are sort of the warning signs that a postmortem itself is either becoming performative, people are sort of acting rather than really doing, or on the other end of the spectrum, one of the problems that I see is that they are too driven by blame or trying to account responsibility for the person that had the issue or mistake.
You don't want to create a bureaucracy where people do postmortems because that's just the way it is and that's what we're supposed to do. Your team needs to understand why, like what's the value in this. They need to understand, believe, and be convinced of the value of them. I mean, it doesn't have to be mandatory. It's a way to do better. So if they're not bought in the fact that this is continuous improvement opportunity, then yeah, it makes no sense to keep doing them just because every bug needs a postmortem. I think it's a good mindset to say that, to prevent the let's just move forward, let's ignore this and move forward situation. But you need to create this culture where people are convinced of the value of this continuous improvement exercise, and they understand why they're doing it. They're not just going through the motions just to please their, manager. I think a good way to see if it's working is, do people share their postmortems, like talk about them? Do they lead to actions and reactions? Do they get challenges? Is this support for team reflection? Are they used as basis for other actions throughout your team's work stream? Do you do some analysis of, we've had 3 issues that are slightly related. Okay, we need to do something about them. Even though individually we decided to not act on this particular cause, but we looked at them, we shared them, and decided, okay, this is actually, we have a shared cause, a tiny shared cause between multiple issues that we've had as a team in the past. I think those are signs that it's not a postmortem bureaucracy. It's actually a continuous improvement system that's working as a team and not just as individuals.
Yeah, and one of the other symptoms that I've seen that it's working really well as well is the sort of virality of it. I worked in one organization where they'd never done retros, never done postmortems, and after I introduced it, they'd been working with it for probably about, 3 months, 4 months. And initially there were quite a lot of them because there was quite a few learnings to pick up very quickly. And one of the things that I noticed after about 3 months was that other departments started doing postmortems on scenarios that they faced where they had been collaborating with engineering on stuff when they were sort of trying to figure out what had gone wrong. And for me, that was a good sign that it was so much value that it wasn't an endured chore. It was something that they were seeing and putting towards that. But in your mind, what do you think are sort of the 2 or 3 key things about a postmortem that give it the chance of going viral as a sort of a concept within an organization?
Good question. I love this, what you described, postmortems going viral and other teams and departments picking up on the practice, and like because they're convinced, they've seen it working and they want to apply it in their own situation. It can be like hiring, HR. I mean, there are bugs in a lot of systems, so there are a lot of places for postmortems to have value. Love this. So yeah, how to make sure they're effective.
Yeah, how do you help postmortems become the most valuable that they can be? And also, as you mentioned, so that everybody else sees, understands, and drives the value in them.
The postmortem itself is an investment. It's like an exercise. What matters is the outcome. Like what does it change in the end? I think a situation where it wouldn't work is you have a team, it's doing a lot of postmortems, but problems keep happening. And this is what you want to avoid, and you're demonstrating that your system doesn't work. So the opposite would be you're showing that your postmortem lead to actions that actually improve the situation, lead to positive business outcomes. So it can be tricky because how can you show that a bug is not happening because of a postmortem that you went through a month ago? Like the bug is not happening, so how can you show it? It can be tricky to demonstrate the value of postmortems. Sometimes it's like seeing a reduction in the number of bugs, showing that your total number of bugs is going down. Can be a reduction in the frequency of production issues. These are interesting metrics to track and show to demonstrate impact. It can be for the product team, it can be for the rest of the company. Basically, it's showing that your continuous improvement system is working.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I often find that if you've got a support team who handle the incoming queries, inquiries, and bug challenges, that looking at their stats is often quite a good way of demonstrating value coming out of postmortem type situations.
Yeah, exactly. So this would be the direct customer impact, basically production issues, bugs that were impacting customers and now that are less and less impacting them. You can show that one particular source of issue is not happening anymore. Sometimes you're not fixing all the bugs. You're focusing on like the most recurring or impactful ones. And showing that one source of bug has disappeared can also be a good way to show the value of the investment you made in postmortems.
And the other one that I love measuring is developer experience, because often if you've got fewer bugs, there's less interruption from feature development time, which most engineers prefer over analysis and diagnosis of stuff that went wrong on yesterday's code. And so often developer experience can be another way of tracking how effective retrospectives or postmortems are as well.
Indeed. I have an example of this where sometimes it's the developer themselves applying the new technique that came out of a previous postmortem and realizing, okay, this allowed me to do things right on my first try, right first time. And I can feel that without this postmortem, this investment that was made by a teammate in the past, I would have failed. I probably would not have thought about this particular use case. And I can feel the benefit. I can feel that I'm going faster because I'm using a new shared library component that allows to, implement charts faster. I have this like test data that I can use to validate that the performance of my feature is good enough. And I know that this was an investment made by a teammate in the past, and I can celebrate this. I can say thank you for the work you put into really fixing this issue in the past and not just blindly moving on to your next task. So yeah, basically celebrating either the direct impact on bugs and production issues, or celebrating the impact on improved productivity, better development experience because we've made some improvement in our ways of working.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. If you can get to the point where somebody else says thank you, shows gratitude, that's a really, really big signal, because it happens so infrequently that when it does, it should be a sort of a great big happy flag being waved, because honestly, the number of times I see engineers actually saying thank you to each other is unfortunately too small. Now, one of the other things I wanted to pick up on is the power of doing this relatively quickly after the event happens, because one of the other process smells that I've seen is you go, oh yeah, we've had this issue, we've fixed it, but we'll look at it later. How important do you think it is to do that postmortem soon after the actual event?
multiple good reasons to do this quickly. The reason to not do it would be I have like already stuff on my mind and I'll do this later. But this is a wrong reason. I think all the good reasons pointing to doing the postmortem quickly are that you will avoid the problem from happening, and it might happen like the next day or the next week. So the sooner you implement the countermeasures, the earlier you can benefit from them. And not only you, I mean, the whole team. And that's the point. Another reason is it might be easier. I mean, I mentioned forensics tools earlier.
Yeah.
Sometimes like troubleshooting an issue that happened like a couple of weeks ago is much harder than if it happened yesterday. In French, we say battre le fer tant qu'il est chaud. So yeah, let's do the postmortem really quickly after the issue happened. First, stem the bleeding, but then right after, analyze the situation and implement the countermeasures. Otherwise, you'll just like lock this for later and not touch it. Also, in your like the issue feels further away. If you let time pass, like it's not the same. Like something happened 2 weeks ago. It's not hot anymore. It's not like something you really want to look into. It's no longer the right moment.
You don't feel the urgency. It feels like a distraction.
Yeah, exactly. So you could decide not to do it at all. This can be a valid option. Like Amazon Cloudflare went down. I mean, we're not changing. We're sticking with Cloudflare for now. Let's just reuse their postmortem for our postmortem and move on. But if you want to do a postmortem, you need to do it quickly after the event.
Now, one of the tempting things about speed is that I see this happening all the time where business leaders basically, okay, great, look, you stemmed the problem, forget the post-mortem bit because actually the value was in stopping that, and let's just carry on. And that, as you say, you can actively decide that is the approach you're going to take. But I find that tends to be a false economy if that's done repeatedly, if that becomes sort of the major way of working. What are your thoughts on that?
My thought is that it's better to default to doing it too often than doing it too infrequently. It's hard to measure like the cumulative cost of an issue happening several times in the future. Like it's hard to figure out like how much does it cost. It's people have a hard time understanding this, like and thinking about it. It's easy to minimize the cumulative future impact of this issue happening again, which would be a reason not to invest in the postmortem. So, yeah.
And I see that kind of mental maths playing out all the time with automation, with postmortems, with removing manual steps, with simplifying processes. And it's exactly as you say, it's really hard to look at something, okay, right, this is probably going to happen another 17 times this year. Each time it happens, it's going to take 5 man days. Each man day is equivalent to this amount of dollars. And when I say man, I could mean woman as well. And then turn that into a financial value and go, oh, okay, that actually costs us this much. But the postmortem only costs us this much and the action only costs this much. Like balancing those two against each other, I think is very rarely done in a very sort of very clinical way like that.
It would be great to be able to do some kind of ROI analysis for everything every time. But I mean, this is expensive. It takes like mental energy.
But I think there is an element of that when we decide, okay, this is Cloudflare going down. It's only happened once in the last 6 years. It costs us this much as a business, but it would actually cost us even more to try and come up with a 2 cloud provider solution situation. So I think there is an element that we do that. It's just that we do a very quick sort of mental back of the envelope kind of calculation rather than sort of writing it out and laying it down.
You don't want to spend more time deciding if you're going to invest in a postmortem than doing the postmortem itself. So that's why my advice is to default to just do it. It should not be very long. I mean, if writing down a postmortem takes you several days, you have a bigger issue. I mean, you have to do a postmortem on the postmortem itself. It's becoming a bit meta, but it should not be hard. You need to do it quickly. It should be a couple hours maximum, and this way it should not be hard to decide if it's worth the investment or not.
Cool. Okay. And so what you're saying is it should be maximum a couple of hours. Probably only very few people involved with it, I'm guessing.
It depends on the magnitude of the event. Of course, if it's a major outage, like your business is down for several days, you need to, like, the postmortem I mean, you should share the postmortem with like your customers at some point. But if it's a small issue that happened, like if the blast radius is small, then yeah, it's one person spending 1 hour on the topic and maybe adding a new rules to the linter in the end.
Right. So making sure you've got an appropriate process for the scale of problem. But I think also that you have an adaptive process for running postmortem. So it isn't just a one size fits all then.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of postmortems that we've shared with the whole company, and because the impact was important enough, and sometimes some postmortems are not even worth sharing. Maybe they're only worth writing down for the person to make sure they like their mental process is correct, like that. Even for themselves in the future, you can write a postmortem only just for yourself. When the same issue will happen 3 months from now, you'll be happy to be able to look it up and figure out, oh yeah, I was wrong actually.
When you said that at first, I sort of thought, I've never seen a postmortem that's never shared with anybody. And I thought, actually, yeah, I've written several meeting notes where I thought, okay, this happened. This is what I shouldn't do next time. And yeah, effectively, it's a meeting note that I've left myself and nobody else read it. It was just for me. So yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point, isn't it? It doesn't always have to be something that's shared with everybody. But I think your default is to share it with the people for whom it's most appropriate, and mainly so the team can learn from it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if the outcome of the postmortem is a new process for the team, the team should be aware of it. They should be able to challenge your reasoning and contribute basically to this problem solving instead of just accepting what you've done. Yeah, the range, basically the number of people you should share it with depends on like the impact the issue had, the consequences of the countermeasure you decided to implement. So it can range from like just your teammates to the whole company to your customers, depending on the situation.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've seen is those organizations who have a format and a process for running postmortems, then when it comes to that big one that you really want to share with your customers, you're less worried about doing so. Whereas if it's the first time you've run a postmortem, it's just affected all of your customers for 2 days, you've got to release it, you tend to go through a bunch more approval rounds before you go, okay, this is ready for publication. Whereas again, customers kind of want to know what happened because the system's down. So if you've got a postmortem process that you're able to just go, okay, there's the outcome of it, we're happy with it, this is the same we do every time, you can just send that out with a lot more confidence than if it's like the only one you've ever done or the first one you've done in a while, for example. And so I think that sharing it and then the routine of doing it becomes less scary and also a lot more straightforward because you've got a template to follow.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a good way to sell postmortem. Like this way, when you have a big outage impacting all customers, we'll be ready. I'm not sure it's a great selling point for postmortems, but I agree. You should invest in being ready for when this happens because I mean, if you're successful, it will probably happen to you. Going back to the culture, you mentioned earlier the impact of doing it and avoiding blame. I think it's an important thing too. If you create this habit of basically celebrating issues, but mostly celebrating the learning process that comes out of it, it creates this culture where people are not afraid to show that something bad happened, and people are excited at the idea of doing better and improving the situation so that it doesn't happen again. You create this environment where people are embracing failure, not because they're happy to fail, but because they're happy to learn from it.
And it's such an important element of psychological safety where people feel not only okay, but happy and good to speak out about things that have happened, knowing that there is a process to handle it. So yeah, I love that point. I think that's really powerful as well for a lot of organizations where there exists, for one reason or another, a worry, a concern with either highlighting where things have gone wrong or worried about what happens after they've gone wrong. And so I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, you don't want people to hide issues under the rug. You want them to shine light on them and then actually do the work before even you asked. You asked earlier, like as a CTO, what should be your role? You should not do the troubleshooting. Your role can be to lead by example when you're making mistakes. You can be the one sharing postmortems on like, I've done this. I actually like things went wrong. And I've done an analysis of why, and this is my postmortem. This is something that anyone can do, but you as a CTO, as a leader, doing it sets up the stage for everyone else to follow your tracks.
Now, I think in terms of being transparent, shining a light and not hiding this under the rug, I think what we should do then is turn this into a pragmatic playbook that the others can follow who are listening. So step 1 then, stem the bleeding. So make sure you fix the core issue, the root issue that's happening. Sorry, not the root issue. Fix the immediate issue in front of you.
Yeah, not the root cause, actually, the immediate issue. You need to just apply some spray, Band-Aid, make sure it kind of works so that your customer can keep on working.
Got it. Step 2 then that's where you do the retro. Identify the chain of events that led to the situation.
Yeah. Then this is where you calm down and you analyze the whole situation and you draw like what happened and why.
Absolutely. And I think the thing I like about step 3 is you mentioned about shifting left, is moving upstream. How could you have caught the issue earlier? So try and list out ways in which you could have caught, fixed, or prevented the issue from happening earlier in the process.
Exactly. Multiple ways to fix the issue, and the earlier in the value stream, the better.
The better, absolutely. And then number 4, which is pretty much the first thing you came out with in the beginning of the conversation, was implement at least one thing. Make sure there is a so what to your investigation.
Yeah. The conclusion should be, we are doing this and it should make things better.
Which segues perfectly into number 5, which is share what you've done with the appropriate audience, whether it's your peers, the team, or hopefully not, but maybe even the customers in some situations.
Exactly.
Did we miss anything out?
No, I think it's a good 5 steps process to implement some continuous improvement in your team.
Fantastic. Bastien, it's been wonderful to talk to you today. How can people get hold of you if they want to carry on the conversation?
Nothing special. I'm on LinkedIn. People can message me over there. I'm not active. I'm not selling anything. I'm not active on social media that much. So yeah, basically LinkedIn should be the best way to get a hold of me.
Excellent. And if anybody is interested in making clinical trials more efficient, they can go to the main website for Inauto as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. It's been a pleasure to have you on, Bastien. If you were to give one tip, and I love asking this question, everybody comes on, one tip to a CTO who's just come into their role or is just been promoted to CTO, what would you say is the one thing that they need to do?
Whoa, I was not ready for this. Okay, so you're a new CTO. My tip would be, before acting, watch.
I think that's a really good piece of advice. Bastien, thanks very much.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the whole episode. I appreciate your time. So just before you go, I'd like to ask you for a favor in return for putting together this episode of the CTO Playbook for you. Please share the episode with just one person who will appreciate it. Wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or another platform, sharing the episode will help more CTOs find the podcast and enable me to create more great content. Remember that you can find more information on the CTOplaybook.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the CTO Playbook.